Hi, everybody, and welcome back to The Sweet Spot. I'm so pleased today to introduce you to Miranda Bradley. She is the owner of Be Creative, which is a marketing firm in Texas. And, as her bio reads, at any given time, she can be cooking with one hand, typing with another, hugging her kids with an elbow, signing permission forms with a pen between her teeth, and holding a speakerphone conversation while stirring, and all the time looking fabulous, of course. So she's pretty much like all of us.
Yeah.
She's written a great book called Blessed Are the Jesus Chicks, and it goes through working women right back from the First Testament right through, and gives us some wonderful stories and words of wisdom. Welcome, Miranda.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here.
We are so pleased to have you here. Miranda, tell us, for you, what is the hardest thing about being a working mother, given you do it so beautifully?
Well, none of us does it beautifully all the time. I'll just say that. And I'm one of them. I think, first of all, what I try to tell people whenever I speak to women's groups, especially mothers groups, is I say, if you are a working mother, raise your hand. And women who stay home won't raise their hands. And I'll say, if you're a mother in this room and you didn't raise your hand, then you answered wrong, because every single mother is a working mother. Yeah. Every woman carries a huge load. She's usually doing more than 10 jobs at a time. So every mother is a working mother. And I like to point that out because whether you're staying at home or you're working outside the home or you're working from home, it's all work. It's all hard. And there's beautiful, beautiful, exciting, wonderful things about it. But there's also really, really tough days. Days when you just think, I'm not doing this well. Not doing any of it well. Yeah. And I think the struggle is that so many of us don't realize that all of us are feeling the same way. Yeah. And we look at other people and we think, well, they've got it all together. Why does Heidi Klum have 16 children and look awesome and beautiful and can have a 1,000 different jobs, but I can't even get my 2 kids dressed in the morning? We tend to do the comparison game. And I think that's one of the hardest things about being a mom, period, is you compare yourself to other people. And we all just need to know that everybody has their bad days, everybody has their good days, and nobody's doing it perfectly. And giving ourselves permission to recognize that, But one thing that I was thinking of when you and I have been talking about getting ready for the interview was when I first started out with my business, and I'll tell you my whole story later, but basically I started out with, I had no capital. I started with my laptop and 2 clients, and the hope that I could, put together enough income to allow myself to have time for my kids. And it was hard. And I remember meeting a brand new client, and I had to cold call clients. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting down with basically my computer and Googling nonprofits in the area and calling them saying, can you use marketing work? Can I come and have a meeting with you? And out of probably 150 phone calls, I had 5 people call me back or make appointments, which was exciting for me. Yeah. I was like thrilled, I got 5 interviews. That's great. But the trade-off was I had my infant. I had just had a baby when I started Be Creative. I mean, that was the whole point of having Be Creative, was to be able to be home with my boys. So Bo, my youngest, was a baby, still in like the baby Bjorn, like teeny tiny. And I was getting ready to go meet this new client, and I had everything ready to go. And, getting out of the car to put him in the baby Bjorn in the parking lot of this client's office, he spits up all over me. I mean, all over me. The worst ever. I was just like, this cannot be happening. And I just had to wipe it up, and try to spray myself with whatever I could to get rid of the stench, because it was gross. I grabbed my stuff and I walked in like a rock star, and I was like, I just put it on the table. Said, I am a new mom. This is my baby. Be Creative is my new baby, and I hope that you'll just forgive the stench, because I do have some really good things to share with you, and just move forward. And funnily enough, the person I was meeting with wasn't. Yeah, I mean, the woman that she was a woman, she got it. She empathized, and if nothing else, I think I got that client because she connected with me on that level. So
yes,
it can work for you.
Yes, yes,
even your bad days.
Yes, and don't we think that we have to be perfect, and yet when we show that we're not, that is when true connections happen.
Absolutely. And you'd be amazed at when you're vulnerable and you put it out there and you say, today is not a good day. Today is just a crapper. It's all going downhill. The support you will get from other women and men, but women especially, because they get it. They know some days you're trying your best and it's just not good enough, and tomorrow's a new day. But I think you're right. I mean, being vulnerable with each other is so hard to do, but it has so many great rewards,
That's a very funny story. I have a very similar one, actually. What is it about babies and vomit?
They know. They're like, I'm just going to embarrass mommy.
I'm sure we've all got a vomit story or two up our sleeve.
I'm sure.
So tell us more about Be Creative and how you did birth that, and the everything that came along with it.
Okay. I'm going to try not to do the huge, super long version. I'm a Texan and we really like our yarns, so I'm gonna condense it a little bit. But basically, I had been the director of communications for a large nonprofit in the area, a Christian nonprofit. I loved my job. I wrote stories about kids who needed new families, and moms who were single moms living in a family care program in the area, and I absolutely loved that. But when I was working, I still had a son already, and I'd have to drop him off at daycare because I had to be at work at 7:30. I had to drop him off at daycare by 6:45 at least to get to work on time. And then I wouldn't pick him up until 5:30 at night. Mm. And as he got older and older and older, and this is from the time he was an infant, from the time, as he got older, I realized this is not working. This is so hard. I was missing these big chunks of time. Mm. And when I was at work, I was thinking about my baby. When I was with my baby, I was thinking about work, which is common dilemma among us working moms. So when I got pregnant with my second son, I really started doing a lot of praying about it. I was like, I just really need to know what my path is going to be. And I should say, in the middle of all of this, being a working mom in a Christian organization, I was also feeling a lack of support. A lot of people, because a lot of our donor base was older, the women would stop me and they'd say, so now that you have a baby, when are you going to quit working? Right. Well, it just wasn't an option for me. I mean, my husband and I didn't have the kind of income where that was just easy for me to do.
Yeah.
It would have been really, really hard. Mm. And so I often felt judged about that. So in the middle of that, I started writing my book. So I'm writing my book and I get pregnant at the same time. And so I'm working on both of those things. And as I'm writing the book, I'm realizing, all of these examples of women in the Bible who worked, and not just worked, but they made their own rules about how they were going to work. Yeah. Really encouraged me.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of praying about it. I finally went to my boss, who I had a new boss at the time, and he was really supportive. And I explained to him, I just can't continue doing this. And he said, whatever you want it, because I should also note that the organization I worked for had never, ever had a contract employee, ever, in the entire almost 50 years that they'd been in existence. Yeah. So it was a big deal. And I decided I wanted to go on contract. And I had to put together the contract. My boss, he actually walked alongside me and helped me kind of tweak the contract so that it would be acceptable to the higher ups, Yep. But I started with that, and then one other client. So those were my two clients, was my former employer and the YMCA, and I knew the marketing person at the YMCA. So, because we'd worked alongside each other. I utilized those connections and said, okay, let's do this. And I tell people all the time, it was very much akin to jumping off a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean. I mean, the boat floats. It's very comfortable. There's food and water and entertainment. So, I mean, the organization I worked for at the time, I liked it there, and it was comfortable, and I enjoyed myself. But there were parts of my life I was missing out on.
Yeah.
And I told my husband, I said, I'm not going to know what's out in the ocean unless I jump in. And so we decided to do that. And it was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, because I was making a very good salary, and it was just cut off, basically, at that point. And it was up to me to get that, to make my salary. It wasn't like I could just show up and get paid. I had to make those cold calls. I had to make those appointments. And it was stressful because right after I had Bo, I had my maternity leave. And then once that was up, that was it. And my book came out the same month that my son was born. So all three of these things are happening all at once. My husband says I don't know how to do anything simply.
or one by one.
But what I found, right. And what I found was, while it was scary and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to swim, once I got in the ocean, I realized there's so many possibilities. Yeah. Because I got out of the box that I'd put myself in. I had said I'd been there 8 years. I said, this is where I am. This is where I'm going to be. And there's nothing wrong with the security of that, but not for what I needed in my life. And there just comes a point when you have to decide, am I going to stay in this box, or am I going to color outside of it and see what else is out there? And thankfully, it's been a very interesting, exciting, scary journey that I would not trade for anything.
That is terrific. And and how many years of that hard labor and that the testing before you did get onto your feet?
Oh, Kim, I'm sorry. Say that again. I think I lost you there for a second.
Sure. I said, how many years do you think it was before you were, at a place where you had, replaced your income and had that work-life balance again?
It took probably a good 2 years before we actually made up the money. And thankfully, my husband had also gotten a job where he made a little bit more, so it sort of counteracted it. But I think really you have to be realistic with yourself and know I'm not going to make automatically what I made before. That's right. And the trade-off is you have to ask yourself, how much are my kids worth? They're priceless. So I believe that when you get to the end of your life, right, you're never going to say, gosh, I wish I'd made more money. And I really wish I would have, worked more. Or I wish I would have driven a better car or lived in a nicer house. When you get to the end of your life, you're going to wish you'd spent more time with the people you love. And for instance, this week is spring break. Because I made the decision I did, I'm able to be home every single day with my kids. And while it's the end of spring break and I'm ready for them to go back now, it would be so much harder if I knew that there were things out there we could be doing and enjoying together, but yet I have to stick them in a camp somewhere just because I have to go to work, or or I have to get them to stay with their grandparents while I work a 50-hour week. I just think there's so much more out there for us, and I think women really in the depths of their soul want that time.
Yeah, I
you know.
agree. I think it's just really important for women when they're, when they are building their businesses or changing tact, or, to have that realistic expectation that it is a good couple of years. It's not like, you go from this and then, well, not for most of us anyway. Some, of course, let it happen. But, in general, it does take a good couple of years.
It does. And it takes tenacity. You have to know that if something's not working, if you decide to, let's say, to go off on your own, and what you were doing in your old life isn't working the same as in this new life,
Yep.
you sort of have to be agile, and you have to be able to change tactics. I had to start doing web design, which I'd never really done before. I mean, I'm a good visual designer, but as far as learning the new software, I had to really get up on that. Social media came along in the span of time, really big in the span of time that I've been doing my business, and I had to learn, and I'm still learning, all the ins and outs of how to make that effective, how to do that effectively for clients, because just with anything, you have to stay on top of the changing trends.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is that some people don't realize that as much as you have to stay on top of the changing trends in, let's say, a traditional place, when you're on your own, you have to be the one initiating that. When you're in a traditional workplace, you have an IT person or a boss or somebody coming and saying, you need to know these things. Yeah. Well, when you're on your own, you are your IT person, you are your financial advisor, you are your CPA. I mean, you have to make it all work for yourself.
You can't leave the photocopier jammed, can you?
No, you can't. You can't let somebody else take care of it. And that's the hardest part, because you are everything to the business when you start out, at least for me. I mean, I guess some people can start out with a staff, but I had no staff. I mean, it was me and outsourcers, and that was it.
Yeah. Now, in your work and your life, you've created a lot of structures, haven't you, to make this all happen. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I can say, for one thing, before I went out on my own, I was not the most organized person. If you'd come into my office, it was a disaster area. It was awful. Now I'm much more organized with not just my space, but my schedule, so to speak. Like, what I've determined is that I have to block out time for things. I have to say, okay, I really need to go to Bo's, let's say, award ceremony at school. So today, from this time to this time, is mom stuff. Before that is business stuff. And then something else I've done that I think is really important for women especially to do is to have a clock out time, right? So it's really easy nowadays to be connected to our phones and our email constantly. And it's a struggle, I won't lie. But I think clocking out, let's say it's 5 o'clock, you're like, okay, I'm done for the day. Now it's family time. Mm-hmm. And then when the kids go back to bed, if you want to clock back in, that's fine. But I always try to structure it so that my kids don't even know I'm working. Yeah. Because I actually remember recently, my oldest son came to me and he said, Mom, do you work? And I said, oh yeah, I work a lot. He said, you do? And he was shocked, and it cracked me up because I feel like I work all the time. Yeah. Because I'm working at all these strange hours, right? I'm working before they get up. I'm working after they're in bed. I'm working when they're at school, But the fact they never actually see me work is a good thing, I think, because they realize in their life they're the center, right? Which is the whole point in my mind. So I think that showed me that what I was doing was working, right? That my little schedule was working. And there are days, I won't lie, that I have to open up my computer and be like, guys, I just have to take care of this thing real quick. Yeah. And they're fine. But for the most, because it's not the norm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I tried to really, be sure that they know I'm just doing this really quickly, and then I shut it down as soon as I can. The focus really needs to be there with them as much as possible. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's great. And
I suppose as a result of the book that you wrote, you've really sort of, created your own rules and how you want to be in the world as a mother, as a business owner, as a wife. You're not one for convention, really.
No, not. And you know what's funny is that I never would have thought of myself as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Ever. I mean, if you had said that to me, I had a friend who started a photography business, and she was pretty young. She was like 5 years younger than me. And I was working at my job at the time, and had this whole thought of starting my own business hadn't even entered my mind. And she was starting her own photography business. And I just thought that was so impressive.
Yeah.
And I even said to her then, I said, I can't ever imagine starting my own business. And 2 or 3 years later, here I was. But as far as like making rules for yourself, I actually, in my book, talked about that, how you have to prioritize what is important to you, okay? And for me, it was being with my family. And that's not true for everybody, and I understand that. Everybody's built differently, but for me, that was the top priority, was that I was able to be available and present. And in my book, I talk about how once you make that priority list, if what your current situation is not working for you, you have to take charge of that. Otherwise, your life is going to run you. You're not going to run your life. So I encourage women to go to their bosses, if they're in a traditional workplace, and say to their bosses, these are the things that I need that I'm not getting. And that could be a space to breastfeed at your office, extra money for childcare. It could be, I need flex time so that I can come and go as I please, so I can be at my kids' awards ceremony, but it has to work for you. And I think going in with a structured idea of what will work for you is essential to your work-life balance and making your own rules for yourself. Like, one thing I tell people is, don't tell me that we have a problem unless you have a solution. And I think
first manager said that, and I love it. I've worked that way forever. I love it.
Absolutely. And you have to think of that way when you're dealing with other people who are maybe not be in your situation. Maybe your boss is a guy. Maybe your boss is a woman who's never had kids, or, doesn't get your priority list. But if you go in there and say, there are some things that I need, I've thought of some ways we could accomplish them. Let me lay them out for you, and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Instead of going in, demanding, but going in to have a conversation. I think that's, for me, I think it's the most important way for women to take charge of their lives, because it really does impact so many areas.
Yeah.
If your work is good, your life can be good. I really believe that.
Yeah, that is great. And do you have any other advice for our viewers before we finish up, Miranda?
I have so much advice. The trouble is narrowing it down. One thing I would say is, if you're not a prayer, if you're somebody who doesn't pray, I totally respect that. But I would say find quiet moments, okay, if you're not a prayer, because life gets really, really, really crazy, and there's a lot of stress and anxiety surrounding us all the time. For me, it's prayer. I have to go to the Word, and I have to pray, and I have to ask for God's guidance in my life every day, because I fail every day. Every day I struggle to do better than I did the day before. But I know that as long as I'm doing my best to do my best, it's going to be okay. But having that quiet moment helps me direct my path a little bit more, that's one thing. Another thing is, just don't be afraid. I heard this great phrase recently. My son and I went on a tour of a nonprofit here in town, and the woman who was giving the tour said, when we started this nonprofit, we had to learn not to be afraid to fail forward. Pardon me. And I loved that phrase. And
That's a great phrase.
It's a great phrase. It's so beautiful, because what it says is, there is no bad failure. If you fail at one thing, that's pretty exciting because you're learning something new about yourself, about the way you handle a situation, about other people. You can use that to your advantage. And how exciting is that, that you got an opportunity to grow today? And so I say, don't be afraid to fail forward, because you may not get it right the first time out. That conversation with your boss may not go well, but that doesn't mean you should stop having the conversation, because if you are serious about your priorities, they will become serious about your priorities. I really do believe that. And the last thing I'll say is this. I believe that our work lives can become like old shoes, right? Really comfortable. They're really comfortable, and we like the way they feel on our feet, but we look down and they are just not so pretty anymore, right? They do not fit the way we want to be. And I think life is just really too short to wear ugly shoes. It just really is. There are shoes out there that fit just as well, but they look fabulous. So why not find the shoe that fits and is fabulous? So that's what I say.
Love it. Love it.
I hope that helps somebody out there, but I really believe it.
So life
is just too short to hate anything about it.
Yeah.
Go get your new shoes. Go slip them on, wear them out, and enjoy them, because that's what life's all about.
Yeah. Oh, that is great advice, and I love how light and fun you are, Miranda. You take that with you everywhere.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for being on the Sweet Spot today, Miranda. We have links below so that all of our viewers can get in touch with you and read more about you. And
great.
I really appreciate all of your messages today. It was absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on the Sweet Spot. Bye, everyone.